This is pretty amazing though. It's exhaustive. It's really exhaustive. Like this is like Quran, Arabic language students.
Jannah.
Jannah, yeah, honestly.
Yeah, I sometimes think like, I could form a course, like a whole university course
Just off
just on this book.
Yeah, honestly.
I'm not even joking. But any course that is going to teach Quranic language has to take account of this book. So speaking of Huruf al-Ma'ani, now it is time to bring out
the monster.
the big boss, the final boss.
That is a goal in life.
Yeah, from the
That's
Muslims.
amazing.
Yeah.
This is amazing.
So you can see
You're getting robbed.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I think
Assalamu
I wanted to follow up on something that you asked about last time. At the beginning of Surah Al-Rahman, is there a difference of opinion about whether Ar-Rahman by itself is an ayah? And it turns out, yes, it is. So in the Kufan and Shami Levantine Mus'haf, there are 78 ayahs in Surah Al-Rahman. And one of the reasons of that is that they stop here as the end of an ayah. But various others considered Ar-Rahman wa 'allama al-Qur'an as one ayah together. So these are the kind of things that do exist. And so this is one book that talks about that. It's a classical book, but has been recently published in this form.
Got an English title, but I didn't see any English inside.
No, it's just so you know what it is in English, and you, oh wow, yeah,
And then
and then nothing.
Okay. Could be like that.
Yeah, actually, there's probably like a little bit of
There's like a page in the end.
This is like just a summary of what the book is about.
Okay.
This is about starting and stopping. So, or the number of ayahs in each surah. That's what it's about.
Yeah.
So that brings us on to talk about Masahif, and then we can talk about Qira'at, and these are potentially huge
So
topics.
Masahif, copies of the Quran, and Qira'at, variant readings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So actually what I'll do is I'll make some space here to look at a couple of beauties that I've got here. These are about Masahif as well. This is something I picked up in Qatar from the Museum of Islamic Art in Doha. It just gives you a nice sort of, that's actually an extra thing. So it gives you a nice sample of different script styles through the ages, the way that they're written, some of the way that they're ornamented and beautified, and how ayahs are divided, with what kind of markers, different script styles.
Beautiful.
So, it's just, it's incredibly delightful to see manuscripts in person, or even, you can find digitized versions of these things now are much easier to find with advent of modern technologies, and even social media. Telegram is a big one for distributing manuscripts of all sorts of books, including
spectacular script. Look at that.
Yeah, so these are probably all displayed in the museum there. Oh, this is the famous Blue Quran, as it's called. Very, very spectacular kind of script in it. But these are different artistic styles. But also, what's interesting about Masahif and their history is, the specifics of how they're written, especially the very early ones, has a lot to tell us about the preservation of the Quran. As we know, the Sahaba wrote down for themselves, or some of them, officially and formally for the Prophet ﷺ. And when they did that, there's some difference of opinion about, were they following instructions from the Prophet ﷺ about exactly how to spell certain words or not. As, I think the stronger scholarship was on the side of not, or that is to say they were following conventions that were available
of the Arabic
to them
language.
at the time.
Yeah.
And those were not necessarily stable. Like even between America and Britain, we have different spelling of words like color, which we spell C-O-L-O-U-R, and you spell incorrectly. So these are things which they're committed.
You spell you.
You, yeah.
Spell incorrectly.
Yeah, okay. Sure. Who spelled it first? So these are things where...
Who uses them better? Anyway.
Yeah.
Who divides a nation based on them?
Well, yeah. Well, us as well, unfortunately. So, these writing conventions. It's this is a beautiful book by Professor Muhammad Mustafa Al-Azami. May Allah have mercy on him. Who's the author of that book that we talked about, the history of the Quranic text.
Yeah.
And just before he passed away, he managed to complete and publish this work in which 17 or I think it seems to be 18 copies are compared and lined up of Surah Al-Isra, so that you can see the main point you're supposed to get from this is look at the remarkable consistency over time, but also how the script
from the most ancient to
yes, yeah, from the
that's
most ancient.
Amazing.
Yeah,
this is amazing.
So you can see
you're getting robbed tonight.
Every word, there is consistency, but also a development in how the script is manifested. So he did this for the whole of Surah Al-Isra.
This is amazing.
And of course, there's a lot of studies of early Masahif now. It's becoming a point of interest where, now that things are more available to look at, we can actually look at them directly, or we can look at the scans of them. In the past, there were some scholars who specialized in documenting the differences between the Masahif, because as we know, after that first stage of collection, there was some processes of standardization, especially at the hands of the third Khalifa Uthman radiallahu anhu, that he led the process of gathering everyone upon an agreed script, and then copies were only to be made from those ones, and all others were to be burned, right? Which people get freaked out about, but of course that's how we treat Masahif that have become worn out or not to be used anymore. They're burned. It's more respectful than, throwing it in the rubbish or something. So that was in order to say, look, this limits how the Quran is written, and also limits how the Quran is to be recited, although within the script, as you can see, it's lacking dots, it's lacking vowels. There are some earlier Masahif that do have dots, and those dots are sometimes distinguishing letters, or the dots are used for vowels. But, as we tend to see in the earliest Masahif, it's mostly undotted. So that allowed for some variation and some diversity in the reading traditions that would emerge according to what people received, according to what people transmitted of the recitation of the Quran. So once that happens, then you've got these Masahif which in different regions, because Uthman sent to 4 regions or possibly more according to some reports, and each area like Asham, that is to say what is now Syria and the surrounding countries, and in Mecca and Medina, and what's called Bahrain, although I don't think this refers to the modern country Bahrain, but these areas received Masahif, and then the people there would recite according to the Mus'haf. So in case there were some ways of recitation that had been allowed before, or things that had later been abrogated and replaced by the final revision of the Quran that the Prophet ﷺ recited to Jibreel in the last year of his life, then some of these things may still have been circulating, and then everyone was told, this is the Mus'haf that represents the final status of the Quran. Everyone follows this. Within that, there are some variations allowed in the pronunciation of certain words. This becomes the Qira'at, right?
Right.
But variation in terms of the word order, well, that's not going to happen. Variations in terms of, okay, there was a phrase here that some people were reciting. No, that won't be allowed because we have agreed upon this Mus'haf. So these books like Kitab al-Masahif of Ibn Abi Dawood and Kitab al-Muqni' of Abu Amr al-Dani, again, Spanish scholarship here, these documented the specific differences between the Masahif. So they would go and they see the Masahif in different places, and they would write about what they saw, what they observed. And so these are important early witnesses, which then, you get later scholars who are studying the Masahif based on now uncovering things that had been lost for some time, or digitizing and sharing them amongst the wider public.
Right.
And they're finding more and more that these scholars who documented actually did a really meticulous job. And they did a splendid job of actually capturing what was going on with these various masahif. And that's, that should give us a source of pride. It should give us, pride in our tradition.
And an appreciation of their incredible work.
And confidence in that tradition as well, because sometimes people think, okay, these people were just making it all up, right? But the more that you see that it's actually reflecting closely the realities on the ground, then you realize that, well, we have
a robust tradition.
A robust tradition. Yeah, that's a good word for it. So then also, uncovering and studying these masahif more in detail can lead to conclusions. Like this is a recent book by one of the leading scholars in this field, Ghanem Qaduri al-Hamad, an Iraqi scholar. And his book talks about Ulum al-Qur'an. I had this Ulum al-Qur'an shelf and I brought it for this purpose. Bayn al-Masadiri wal-Masahif. So our books of Ulum al-Qur'an are telling us some things about the Masahif and it's telling us certain things about the Qur'an in general. When we study this Masahif, to what extent do we find that there is correspondence between the theory as has been documented and the reality that's being studied? So I haven't read through this book yet to study it, but I think that as a scholar, he would and anyone should be open to saying, yes, looking at the data might invite us to revise some specifics of things that we said. Like one of the most important things, and I don't know exactly how he talks about it here, is it's very commonly said, early Masahif were undotted and unvowed, full stop. We take that for granted.
Like what this looks like.
Yeah, but more and more we're finding that there are actually a number of first century and early Masahif that were dotted to some extent, and they had multicolored dots even to indicate different things and different readings sometimes. Then dotting maybe fell out of favor, then it came back. But the point is, it existed maybe earlier than people tend to assume.
That's amazing.
So, this links, of course, to the subject of the Qira'at and Ahruf al-Sab'a. It's a huge topic. We can't go into all of it, but it is important to know that these subjects are very, extensively discussed in our classical literature.
Yeah.
And then there's plenty of modern literature as well.
It's one of the fascinations of the Western academics, right?
Yes, but it's also something which maybe especially now has started to cause some, ripples of controversy or confusion amongst Muslim audiences, and partly because they maybe haven't connected with literature, or they haven't also been acquainted with the early works, whether it's to do with Qira'at themselves or is to do with tafsir, because the tafsir tradition itself engages thoroughly with Qira'at.
Qira'at, it does, yeah.
You would look at Tafsir al-Tabari, for example, and he himself is discussing
قرأها كذا وكذا وكذا, and then قرأها,
some of them read like this, some of them read like that, and then he might just tell you, and this one, this is why and that's why, or this is the meaning that follows from this reading, that's the meaning from.
And nobody was having a faith crisis over it.
No,
is the incredible thing.
Even to the extent that sometimes he would say about a certain reading, and I don't like this reading, this is not very good, it's not very fluent in Arabic. He would say that about some readings. And of course, that might include readings that, fell out of favor anyway. But there are some of them that
still around,
remained in favor and became part of what we later know to be the 7 Qira'at. Because al-Tabari comes before the sevenization of the 7. So Ibn Mujahid, the author of Kitab al-Sab'a, he's the one who's created this formal process whereby 7 Qira'at came to be known as the ones that are to be given more attention and therefore formed what we call the canonical readings. Later on, Ibn al-Jazari, this is, I've got, very sha'bi edition, as we say in Egypt. It's not the same as shabi, but sha'bi means like, for the common people like me, whereas you get obviously very fancy editions as well. This comes in 3 volumes like that. So in his work, several centuries later, he then has said, well, in addition to the 7, there's another 3 that are deserving of being counted as canonical readings. So it became the 10 Qira'at. And in all of that, what they're doing is saying, these are ways of reading that have been long established, respected, because the readers who became famous for these readings, like Imam Nafi', like Imam Asim, like Imam Ibn Amir or Abu Amr or Ibn Kathir in Mecca, or as we said, some of them, Nafi' is in Medina. So different regions. So Medina, Kufa, Mecca, and also Ash-Sham. There were readers in these regions who were the top of their field in transmitting the Qira'at. They were top of the field in grammar as well. And this is actually important because it means that when they were reciting, they were very aware and skilled in producing the best awjuh from what they received and what they recited. So it's no coincidence actually that several of the canonical readers are also like the founders of grammatical schools, right?
Yeah.
So they were engaging in a kind of study of those qira'at, and they were selecting and they were advancing the best readings. So those things became like the standardized readings. So we have 7 qira'at and expanded to 10 qira'at. And all of that comes, of course, from something which is called al-Ahruf al-Sab'a, right? I've got quite a few books about al-Ahruf al-Sab'a. I just picked one out to show you. Ma'ani al-Ahruf al-Sab'a. It is an issue and that has been discussed at length throughout our history, and there remains quite considerable question marks over what exactly is meant by these 7 letters or 7 modes. What we do know from various ahadith that are widespread and well known is that the Prophet ﷺ explained that Jibreel alayhi salam has recited to him the Qur'an upon 7 letters. Therefore, Allah has revealed it as such. Allah has revealed it with these 7 ways. That's not the same as the 7 qira'at. That much we should make clear. It's not the 7 qira'at is the 7 ahruf. That much we can say is not the case.
Okay.
But then precisely what is it? Was it like 7 different ways of reading, something like 7 dialects? That's one point of view. Another point of view says the 7 actually refers to ways in which one reading can differ from another, such as something being plural or singular, or being recited with this way or that way. These come as 7 ways of differing. That's actually a popular view amongst a lot of the scholars, including Ibn al-Jazari himself and numerous modern scholars as well. The point is, there's no way of fully settling that. It remains a little bit of a question mark.
How authentic is this narration?
Very authentic. Yeah.
Is that why it was like, that wasn't even the issue? The issue was how do we interpret it?
Yes, and the question, I guess, which, it's not impossible to answer, but I'm just saying where points of view can differ is what's the relationship between the Ahruf Sab'a and then what became the Qira'at? Now, forget the number 7 Qira'at.
Yeah.
Because that's just, Ibn Mujahid decided in his wisdom to focus on 7.
Right, and later on 10.
And maybe he was, some say he could have been influenced by the fact that there was 7 Ahruf to choose 7. It could be.
Right.
And some people said, you shouldn't have done that. You've confused everyone. You made 7 on top of 7, and then everyone will think of Ahruf for the Qira'at. Why have you done this? So then Ibn al-Jazari said, okay, we'll just make it 10, and it doesn't matter. So Qira'ah is not the same as a harf. That much we can say. But the variation that is represented by the Ahruf then turns into the variation which is represented by the Qira'at. That much I think is easy enough to explain. So Qira'at, I'll move to the shelves over here. As I said to you, we have got in the early times certain ways of studying the Quran that were more, let's say, grammar based and linguistic based.
This is an important thing you just said.
Yeah.
And I want to dig into this a little bit. So the earliest commentaries on the Quran that we find in our history that are published are linguistic.
So, okay, we can combine that question with the next shelf. Here I've got Mawsu'at Tafsir al-Ma'thur.
Right.
So this is an encyclopedia of transmitted commentaries of the Quran.
Right.
So if I take Surah Al-Baqarah, this is a recent compilation. It is extracted from things like Imam al-Suyuti's Ad-Durr al-Manthur fi Tafsir al-Ma'thur. And what they've done here, this is produced in Saudi Arabia. What they've done is under every ayah or every little section of an ayah, they'll count the narrations that have come sometimes from the Prophet ﷺ. So here, there's nothing from the Prophet ﷺ. So the first one who's mentioned is Ibn Abbas. Struggling to read this upside down. So we could see here, under this part, there's a Sabab Nuzul narration, Tafsir al-Ayah, something from Ibn Abbas, and then something from the next generation, that's why it's a different color, Abil Aliya, and then Qatada, al-Rabi'. So sometimes you would see, okay, this is starting from the Tabi'in, Saeed ibn Jubayr. Sometimes you got things from the Sahaba, Ibn Abbas, again, Ibn Umar, and then the Tabi'in, Al-Hasan al-Basri. So these narrations were circulating, right? So it wasn't necessarily just in book form, but they were narrations, they're hadiths that are being transmitted. So for sure, we can, in a certain way, say that is the earliest thing, right? Not people sitting and doing grammatical analysis. But then when it comes to the compilations and writing, some of them were hadith-based like this, and others were studying the Qur'an from a linguistic perspective. So here is Ma'an al-Qur'an of Al-Farra. You can see that he's a century and a half after the Hijrah. And this is around, this is slightly after the time when you've got Tafsir of Muqatil, because Tafsir of Muqatil died in 150 of the Hijrah. So it's around that same time, but certainly before Al-Tabari. So in Ma'an al-Qur'an of Al-Farra, it is in a way looking at the Qur'an from the perspective of a grammarian and explaining it in terms of its language and its grammar in tremendous depth, including the issues of the Qira'at, because the Qira'at were intimately connected with the discussion of grammar, right? Because they're saying, okay, some people are reciting it like this. Well, grammatically, that would be understood like this, and the other ones are doing it like that. This develops into a genre which we call Tawjih al-Qira'at. Sometimes it's called Ihtijaj lil-Qira'at. Sometimes it's called Ilal al-Qira'at. Sometimes it's called Ma'ani al-Qira'at. But the term that I tend to use for the whole thing is Tawjih al-Qira'at. That is to say, every reading to explain its basis, linguistic basis, tafsir basis, how does it fit with the meaning. But in these early books, to a large extent, it's a very grammar-based discussion, right? It's not about, for example, what's the isnad of this reading. That's just not the point that they are addressing. Ibn Mujahid is talking about, who are the readers and how did they read and transmit. But these ones are analyzing it.
A century and a half later, we're discussing the grammar and the linguistic implications and what we can learn from that and the meanings of the Quran. And it's interesting that, a lot of times contemporary approaches to tafsir assume that the most authentic tafsir is going to be a tafsir bil-ma'thur, and that's the classical ulama, the earliest ulama, that's all they did. And the linguistic approach is not an authentic approach. It doesn't have a basis in our history. It's a later invention. It's even a deviation from the correct meanings, etc. This is happening
You simply can't do without the linguistic approach. I mean, rather than thinking of it as something that comes after, I see it as something that comes before, not so that it's independent, but the first thing you need to do is study the words as words and the constructions as constructions.
Right.
And then once you've seen the possibilities within that, you can see, okay, narrations and explanations and received interpretations, how do they affect these possibilities? Do they rule some of those possibilities out?
Right.
Because just because somebody said, oh, this means that, it doesn't mean they're telling you it means only that. They could mean it by way of example. The first thing is to understand the general sense.
Right.
Then the narrations are compared with that and they inform and,
have taqwa of Allah. What does that mean? Pray.
Pray, yeah.
You fast. Tafsir of taqwa of Allah is prayer and fast. No, you're telling someone, hey, here's a good way to start off. Pray and fast. So I gotta do nothing else. I had my pork sandwich the other day because taqwa is there, pray and fast.
Yeah, according to the tafsir of
pretty sure there's no such thing. Well, I just made that up.
Yeah,
pork sandwich.
So yeah, there's obviously. Why are we talking about this now?
I'm just saying that if you can find a narration where something's been defined by specific terminology, and then you say, well, this is what the wording means, then one, it's Allah's word and we're caging it. Two, even the people that were saying it aren't necessarily saying this is all it can mean.
Yeah.
And if you think like that, that's not naturally how anybody thinks.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we talk to our kids and they say, hey, be good. What do you mean? Don't eat the cookies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to kick my brother then because I'm already good because I'm not eating the cookies. So I'm going to stick the pencil in this electrical socket and, set the microwave, put my socks in the microwave and,
Sounds like you've got experience.
I've, destructive tendencies. But the point, but I'm still good because I didn't eat the cookies.
You didn't eat the cookies.
This is what I'm saying.
But then you grew up and you ate the cookies.
Yeah, I did.
So yeah, for sure there's subtlety in how the ma'thur tafsir affects the meaning and how it fits.
Sure.
So the point is that you have to actually, capture the sense of what the language gives in order to know how to adjust that based on narrations. So just briefly, I would say that there is a whole genre of works. Like this one is by someone who's on the level of the students of Ibn Mujahid. So this is a big 3-volume book, Al-Hujja fi Ilal al-Qira'at al-Sab'.
Okay.
So here, he's explaining each reading and variation and, the basis of it and the linguistic basis of it and even the meaning basis of it and the tafsir basis. So it's very in depth in order to understand what these qira'at are and how they exist together. And this is an important part, we're just very comfortable about this multiplicity. They didn't try to eliminate it down to one correct reading. They didn't also exaggerate and say, all 7 readings are, in all senses equally authoritative in all ways and all times.
They had their preferences based on other evidences.
Sometimes in a particular way they would say, okay, this reading is clearer, this reading is better supported. And that became taboo later on to have that kind of approach because you're settled.
Okay, yeah.
Things settled onto these 7 and then 10 qira'at to the extent that it wasn't normal anymore for people to critique any reading or to prefer even one reading. It was seen as a purely transmission-based thing. But at this phase, certainly, it was transmission-based, but also there was
analysis and preference-based.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So, as someone who reads the genre, so I don't panic as much as some people do when they come across one quote here and there. But these are some of the classical tawjih works in qira'at.
Okay.
I also have here some modern works of Tawjih al-Qira'at. Some of them take a particular approach, like take, for example, this Tawjih al-Balaghi lil-Qira'at al-Qur'aniyya. So this is pretty nice, but it's organized in order of Balagha topics.
Athf al-Mudaf.
Yeah. And you've got also
بما حفظ الله أي بما حفظ دين الله وعهود الله. Okay. Okay. All right. Yep. دين الله actually. Not deen, is the fa'il. Okay.
So here it would be a case of like what kind of balaghi effect is derived from this reading as opposed to other reading of the same ayah.
Right.
And while you're looking at that, one of the big works in the field is Mu'jam al-Qira'at. I think it's like, is it 10 or 11 volumes? It's 11, including the index. And this supplants an earlier work which is called Mu'jam al-Qira'at, which is also good, but this one is much more in detail. But what I don't like about the introduction here is that
nobody's ever done this before.
Yeah, they talk as if there was no work before that gathered all the qira'at like this. Whereas there's literally one that's called Mu'jam al-Qira'at and it's quite famous. And I used to have them both on my shelf next to each other, but I packed one away for now.
So that this feels more valid when you read. No one's ever done it.
Yeah,
but that one's the boss.
I mean, that other one had nice kind of tables, vertical tables, which is quite cool. But this one, it's got far more detail about each reading, the basis of the reading, who read it, and which books of tafsir and books of qira'at that it can be found in.
Very exhaustive.
So this is a fantastic resource. So Tawjih al-Qira'at is something which I take an interest in from also a translation perspective. When I first signed up to do my PhD and I went to meet my supervisor, who was Professor Muhammad Abdul Halim, the famous Quran translator, my proposal at that time was to talk about the impact of the 10 canonical readings on translation of the Quran.
Okay, very interesting.
But he did not really like the idea for various reasons. But I decided to change just to make things smoother. So I became tafsir of the Quran through the Quran is what I studied. But I still kept my interest on this, and I've been working on it, and now also working on translating the Qira'at. And any translation of the Qira'at should thoroughly depend upon the works which were specialized in discussing the difference in meanings between the Qira'at, like these and the classical tawjih works and the modern tawjih works.
Right.
All right, let's also talk about i'rab.
My favorite.
We talked about sort of the development of ma'ani al-Qur'an and i'rab al-Qur'an, and then of course there's later on modern works. We also have the one by Darwish. I have that packed away as well. This is a modern scholar, Muhammad Ali Taha al-Durra, which is a tafsir in i'rab together. So i'rab of the Quran is a really important field. I've got a few different books that are relevant to this, and we're going to come to this one. I know you're excited.
Oh yeah, that's the one.
So it's a very important field because knowing the position of each word and letter in the sentence, it has a huge effect on meaning. And so this is quite a nice it's ilmu i'rab al-Quran, this the science of doing i'rab of the Quran. And I have other books which talk about the effect of different i'rabs on meaning and on rulings and things like that. And then you've got this very boss of a book, Mughni al-Labib an Kutub al-A'arib. So the Labib is supposed to be the smart person. So this is the Mughni of that smart person. If you're smart enough to read this book and study it, understand it, then he won't need the books of i'rab. He won't need all these many volumes, because at the end of the day, these volumes, they do also capture some of the different possibilities and diversity. One of the worst things to assume is that, well, there's one thing called i'rab al-Quran.
Right.
And actually some people have got that idea because they use the Quranic Arabic corpus online.
And now they got i'rab figured out.
And they think that there is one i'rab of the Quran. That's completely untrue. It's a matter, just like we talked about waqf and ibtida. You can look at it. Does this sentence end here or start there? That's related to i'rab as well.
That's right.
It is the mubtada and the khabar, or this is mubtada and atfu bayan, dhalik al-kitab. Therefore, is it that is the book, or is it that book, for example, right?
Is it badal or is it khabar?
So this would be all aspects of i'rab. And this book
it is an i'rab of the entire Quran, or is it the methodology?
It's the Mughni al-Labib an Kutub al-A'arib. So it's not a book of i'rab. It talks about the rules, and a large part of it is actually talking about the specific huruf and their different usages. All of this stuff, I translated the gist of it, because the gist of it is in al-Itqan fi ulum al-Quran of al-Suyuti. Chapters 40 and 41 are taken from this book. So I've translated that. It means that we translated the gist of Mughni al-Labib. So inshallah, my translation of that will be your Mughni, Ya ulil albab. If you wanted to reconstruct his i'rab, this is extracted from that book, i'rab al-Quran al-Kareem min Mughni al-Labib. So they reconstructed according to which ayahs he actually gives the i'rab of, and they put it in Mus'haf order. But he doesn't do i'rab of every ayah. It's more about this.
But it's enough to get you a full view of his methodology. And
yeah, that will give you like you want to see what his opinion was on the i'rab of a thing.
Right.
It's there, yeah. But it's
awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. So Huruf al-Ma'ani. Yeah. So speaking of Huruf al-Ma'ani, now it is time to bring out
the monster,
the big boss, The final boss.
That is a goal in life.
In fact, I'm gonna I'll bring this over as well because there's a classical work which I recently there's this book channel, and apart from this, what we're doing, there's this I can't remember what it's called, but there's in Arabic there's a channel where this man, I consider him a hype man for Islamic library. He basically he talks about these different books, and he just is so enthusiastic that like I watched his video about this, and I was like immediately placed an order and bought it. So this is by al-Baquli. And it's kind of a classical version of what we're about to see in Dirasat li-Uslub al-Qur'an, where somebody has kind of gathered the different things that are going on in Quranic language and ordered it according to these thematic groups, and they're given examples of it.
This is amazing.
It deserves truly to be called amazing. باب ما ورد في التنزيل من إضمار الجمل، باب ما جاء من حذف المضاف
من الحروف المحذوفة تشبيها بالحركات، ما كنا نبغي والليل ذا يسري.
So it's just gathering the different phenomena in Quranic language and giving you the examples and allowing you to study it systematically.
Wow.
So then in the 20th century, we've got this one, Dirasat li-Uslub al-Qur'an.
Yeah. Yes.
By Muhammad Abdul Khaliq Udayma.
This is amazing.
And it comes in 11 volumes, and it comes in 3 parts. It consists of 3 parts, I think. Let me see.
The ism fi'l and adawat part, yeah? So I'm in the other. This volume is adawat, I'm guessing, because it's got idha here.
Yeah. So you could say that, and he mentions as well that he's taken Mughni al-Labib and he's expanded much more. I think basically his approach was he went through the whole Quran, and under each ayah, carefully documented what's happening in this ayah grammatically, and who said what, and their various opinions about this harf and so on. So he first studied the Quran fully like that. Bear in mind, this is before the age of computers, right? So he's documented like that. Then he reordered and rearranged it according to the topics. Right? So then
just the physical act of doing this is mind-boggling.
People didn't used to do things by halves, But this book is not as well known as it should be, and
this is just, I don't even know what to say.
It's still quite difficult to navigate because it's in all these volumes. But my hope is that in Quran.com we can do a service to the Ummah by taking this material and making it searchable, making it possible to study each letter and each ayah according to the information that's in here.
Yeah.
Because it cross-references,
Yeah. This is, I could get lost in this and just live inside this book.
So this is the second section, and it concerns af'al, verbs, basically. So again, like...
He's going verb by verb?
Yeah, I mean, this is, he gives you... So again, these sections were these lamahat, right?
Something's else, yeah.
And there are sighat. Well, the problem is then they've not voweled it. So it's sighat, is it fa'ala or maybe or fu'al? But the point is that the addition is lacking something really.
I see. You have to look at it.
You have to figure out which one was it.
Okay, it's يبشر فجرنا تحمل استفعيل.
Yeah, so sighat fa'ala.
Yeah, fa'ala, yeah.
Yeah, so the edition does not do justice to what the content is. I mean, this should be reissued, and but inshallah we can digitize it, and I think that does the job.
This is pretty amazing, though. It's exhaustive. It's really exhaustive. Like, this is like Quran, Arabic language students.
Jannah,
yeah, honestly. There's so much work that you would have to go all over the place that it's just...
Yeah, I sometimes think like, I could form a course, like a whole university course just on, just on this book.
Yeah, honestly.
I'm not even joking. But any course that is going to teach Quranic language has to take account of this book and make use of it, and at the very least as a reference.
Yeah, this is even like the fawaid of the awzan as they apply on the ayat.
And it's all the data there, right? So sometimes people will tell you, oh, well, this particular sigha has that meaning.
Yeah.
So he'll document it, and you can see, and you can assess how that's working and in what ways and what context is working.
Yeah. This is a remarkable, like, okay, when you study sarf theoretically, conjugations and applications, this is like applied. This is all the way through and through applied. Qira'at fi shawadh bin fa'ala. Wow.
So yeah, he also says that you have to take into account the different qira'at in order to really talk about Quranic language.
Yeah.
You can't be, as I say, hafs-normative and just imagine that the Quran is just one reading or one narration, which is the reading of Hafs. Speaking of the shawadh, as he mentions, there are some qira'at that are studied purely for their language, but they're not recited. So in the qira'at, we have what are called qira'at mutawatira, as I call them, the canonical readings. That is to say, those are the ones that are accepted as being Quran, the 10 qira'at.
Right.
Beyond that, you have qira'at, which are qira'at shadda. That means they are
rare,
irregular, rare, different ways of putting it. But they're non-canonical, I think, is perhaps a clearer way of distinguishing canonical readings, non-canonical readings. So those are sort of supplementary. They are referred to and looked at by scholars because they were things that people were reading. So they contain linguistic information. And sometimes they might contain within them something that helps you to grasp which meaning is intended in the canonical reading. So the shawadh have a relevance, and there is a whole genre as well of tawjih al-qira'at al-shawadh and the study of them from linguistic perspective.
Wow, okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I have a shelf full of that as well. But for the most part, my attention goes on the qira'at mutawatira.
Linguistic study of the Quran has been, I think, undermined, oversimplified. Islamic materials, Islamic da'wah, Islamic education, reaching the masses is a wonderful thing, but it's a double-edged sword. Our job is to try and simplify the deen so that the world can understand what God is saying and what this message is about. But on the other hand, this religion is remarkably precise because it sits, Allah designed this faith in a way that people would pour the best of their minds to grasp at the most precise meanings. Like the corruption in a religion happens when proper understanding and scholarship is behind a barrier, right? So, for example, people that controlled the Christian narrative, right, the hierarchy of the church, decides what something means, and their discourse is disconnected from the populace. They'll just tell you what God says. You don't get to investigate that. The thing now is, well, somebody's coming along and saying, I'm doing tafsir al-Qur'an bil-Qur'an, right? And they're just butchering so many rules of Arabic, of linguistics, and of tafsir al-Qur'an bil-Qur'an while they're making such claims. And so many of the claims they're making, like, they wouldn't survive in an environment where scholarship was given its due. Like, these resources are there that can utterly destroy the claim that's being made with like profoundly well-documented evidence. But the problem now is, first of all, Quranic studies doesn't get the attention that it should get. Second of all, when it does get it, people that are studying it are in one corner of society, and then the people that are talking about the Quran are disconnected from them, many of them, right? Because what becomes popular is not what is scholarly. What becomes popular is what's easy to understand. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not saying everybody should understand scholar. I can't understand scholars sometimes. Like, it's hard to digest. It's highly academic, and it's frankly boring. How you expect a 15-year-old, 20-year-old to get this stuff? But there has to be. This is where I see like our work in Bayyinah is so important, as we have to have the due diligence done to scholarship, and then we have to do due diligence to present this in easy language. But we have to create access to both. Like somebody hears this in simplified language, should be able to say, where did you get this from? Okay, here's the source code. Here's the materials. Here's here's the inner workings that allow for this discussion to happen. And more, I mean, I don't think we're there yet. That's our vision. But I think more and more, we have to open up access to both of these worlds. And I think what that's going to do, maybe not in our time, maybe not even in our generation, but that's, I think enough people are going to say, you know what? I want to be part of, I got introduced to it from this simplified, distilled version, but I want a taste of the scholarly juice, that this heritage. I want to get a drink from that fountain. So I think we're going to inspire people to go towards Quran-based scholarship. And I think it's going to change the way Quran is perceived. But what I hope we can do is actually really build that bridge between the popular narrative and the scholarly, world. And that I think is the most important, because that's, I think, the failure of past religions is the scholarly remained in the scholarly circle, and the masses remained. They what was popularized for them was something that was disconnected from scholarly work.
And sometimes there's contexts in which looking into things in a more scholarly level conflicts with faith. The faith belongs to the simple people, whereas ilm, as we conceive it, is supposed to be something that leads you into deeper and deeper faith. What is certainly the case, to be fair and to be just in our analysis here, is that sometimes looking into topics in a scholarly level, including things like Ahruf and Qira'at, which we were talking about,
right,
sometimes can present a problem to your preconceived, simplified account of things.
Right.
And for some people, that's difficult. Like some people find it difficult when I tell them.
What do you mean there's more than one way to read the Quran?
Right, even if you say to some people, there probably wasn't a spider and a dove at the cave of Thawr when the Prophet ﷺ was making hijrah. It's like, I've heard that story all my life. I'm just saying, okay, there could have been. There's no reason for it not to be. But who told us this story? Who narrated this story? Have you ever thought about that? Did the spider tell us? Did the dove tell us? We don't have the narrations from anyone who's actually recounting the story, except it's a story. So things like that, some people find that uncomfortable. Like, how could there not be a spider and a dove? Let alone, you've been told all your life and you've been repeating, not one letter, not one vowel is different anywhere you go in the Quran. You will never hear one difference or change. Well, there's something called the Qira'at. If you at least exposed to that much, you will find that strange. But then so many things that when you explore them more and more, your preconceived notions can be challenged. Yeah. And that actually in scholarship is a good thing, but it allows you to
at a mass level, it's a crisis.
It allows you, if you do it in the right way, to get to deeper levels of faith.
So on that note, what I think that needs to happen is there needs to be a revolutionary approach, revolutionary because it doesn't exist right now, that we encourage regard for scholarship, critical thinking, and we get away from taglines in Islamic studies. Like we use these like slogan type Islamic phrases and we build our Islamic account on them. And we build quite a bit of it on, like you said, stories and really, unfortunately, sometimes myths. And we get further and further away from what the Quran intended for its followers, and what the legacy of Rasulullah was. This was supposed to be, it's actually, the more I look at comparative religion and history, there's lots of similarities between us and the Jewish people, historically speaking. There's lots of similarities between us and what happened in Christendom in some ways. But the Quran is incredibly different. Like, it is the first time, I would argue, in human history that your faith is compelling you to investigate. Right? The faith narrative compels you to comply.
For us, follow. Deen is ilm and ilm is deen.
That right. This is unique. And anything that threatens that is threatening Islam itself. And now we're seeing strands of that within the Ummah. Within the Muslim community, there's, no, don't investigate. Or no, we don't want to know too much. Just tell me this much and that's good enough for me. And we've created a culture out of that. But I really want my child to know engineering. And they should know robotics when they're in the fourth grade. They should know something about app development by the time they're in seventh grade. Yeah, you want them to explore that same attitude of exploration. And what's happened culturally. But what I do want my child to do is learn to read the Quran with an imam, with a qari, and just tell them some stories. Islam's done. But what I think we need now is really a revolutionized approach to.
Imagine you taught them just to read the engineering book aloud, but don't tell them what any of the words mean.
Exactly. So I think that a new re-engineering of Islamic education needs to happen. And, at least we can maybe, inshallah, put a dent in our lifetime in the Quran space. Like in Quran-based education, what can we do to create a pathway for people? Inshallah ta'ala.
Allah give us tawfiq.
Ameen, ya Rabbal Alameen. Daunting task ahead. But inspiring, because honestly, the young people around the world, even elders, there's a thirst for this. People want to serve Allah's book. People want to explore. And I think, inshallah, I think some of our followers, viewers are going to see the names of all of these books, and some of them are going to be like, that is amazing. Others are going to say, this is too much. I can't do this. Can we just do a cartoon video instead, like an illustrated guide to...
One thing at a time, really.
One thing at a time, yeah. That's okay. This is not for everyone, but I think some will be inspired and some know that they have the academic promise and they have the potential to, inshallah, take this up. As one of my hopes, actually, out of this series of videos is it inspires people to engage in Quran scholarship. Inshallah ta'ala.
Okay.
All right.
Wrap up here?
Yeah, let's do that. Okay, bye. Go. Good night.
How would you like to explore the heart of the Quran, Surah Yasin, guided by an important mufassir of the 20th century, Muhammad al-Tahir ibn Ashur? We've put on a special course at the Ibn Ashur Center, going through Surah Yasin with a new translation and a new commentary based on the important insights of this great exegete. Head on over to ibnashur.com/academy to find out more. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.